Hello everyone and welcome back into another video. Today we're back in Warframe for a weapon showcase this time, because I haven't seen a lot of people play with this weapon and I think it deserves a bit of love. So here's the Atomos. Okay, so the Atomos is a secondary weapon. It's basically a beam weapon that can link between enemies. So if I shoot at one enemy over here, it does link to other enemies, and those secondary beams will also apply statuses and deal some minor damage, which isn't a lot of damage, because I'm hitting the main target for like 1000, while the other numbers are like 200, so it's about a fifth of the damage I'm dealing to the main target. But the important thing is that it applies statuses. Now, this weapon has an Incarnon form, so I do suggest farming for it. I am not sure how many rotations it will take before the next time we get the Incarnon adapter for this weapon. I'm going to add that in the description and the first comment, so you have a way to know, but remember that it will change in the future, so if you're seeing this video in the future, this might have changed. Okay, so the evolutions I choose for this weapon are, of course, the first one, which is just unlocking the Incarnon form. And the Incarnon form basically charges whenever you're hitting headshots. This is the first build, which is Corrosive and Blast, and it already is performing quite well, as you can see. But then, whenever we switch into the Incarnon form, the weapon becomes a bit of a monster, because now it does become a rocket launcher. And yeah, the damage it deals is just super insanely high, although fire rate is quite slow, and that's a bit annoying. And you have to keep in mind that you can get staggered by the explosion. So yeah, the beam version is a bit safer and it pretty much will deal the same thing. Although swapping to the Incarnon form once in a while is nice to keep your ammo economy up and not waste all your ammo in the first 5 minutes of the mission. The second one, we have a choice between more damage on shield break or more damage whenever your energy is more than 700. Right now, we're just gonna stick to this one because it's going to activate once in a while whenever we destroy some shields. The third evolution is just more range for our beam, and it's probably the best choice between the three, because having more ammo is, of course, nice, but we have means to fix this, and increasing base magazine capacity might sound nice, but also you have to reload from empty, which isn't a thing we always do, so it's not great, but if you like this one, you can go for it. And finally, we can choose between more crit chance, more status chance, or a mix of the two that isn't exactly the best choice. So I do suggest either sticking to crit chance or status chance, depending on what you want to do. If you want the weapon to proc a lot of statuses, just increase your status chance, while for this build, for example, we're going for crit chance because we need to reach that 34% crit chance, the way we can guarantee our crits. And the build looks something like this. So we have both the crit chance and crit damage mode. We're using Jolt and Pistol Pestilence for corrosive and a lot of status chance. Galvanized Diffusion to increase multi-shot by a lot. Then we're using Prime Hit Charge and Frostbite to add blast damage to the weapon and increase the blast damage by a lot. So we will usually proc more blast statuses than corrosive ones, because corrosive is capped at 10 stacks, while blast can just be refreshed every time it reaches 10, so we do want to proc more blast. Then we're using Galvanized Shot to increase status chance and increasing direct damage per status type affecting the target, which in this case is 2, but we will have our pet that can proc a lot more statuses, so keep that in mind. And then we are running Ruinous Extinction in our Exilo slot for more beam length. That means 8 plus 7 from the Incarnon form. We have 15 more meters on our beam. This way we can basically hit the whole room, and it's actually quite nice. And then we are using Secondary Merciless as our arcane of choice, because we will kill a lot of enemies and keeping up this buff is quite easy. You can also use Dexterity if you want to use your melee as well, but of course keep in mind that you have to kill enemies with your melee to increase the damage of your secondary weapon. Okay, how does the actual build perform now? We have our Orokin enemy battalion here that basically mixes a bunch of smaller enemies with bigger enemies, the way we can stack our secondary merciless by a lot. And by the way, my Caliban has literally no modes, nor any Archon shards, and I'm not using even a pet, so there's no additional buffs I'm gaining other than secondary merciless. So, this is how much damage you can expect from the build. Of course, it will take a bit to actually, stack and deal more damage, but when the damage starts ramping up, you might notice that we are actually dealing a bunch more damage, and those blast procs will just keep popping and popping for more and more damage, and enemies won't like that. Anyways, if we spawn those enemies again, now that we have some stacks, of course our damage will be a bit higher. And yeah, you are noticing that enemies are just disappearing. And of course, the more enemies we hit, the more damage we will deal, which is just a nice thing. So that's the Corrosive and Blast version of the weapon. If you don't like Blast and you just want to go for Heat and Corrosive, you can do that. Just get rid of your cold mode and we can instead use, for example, Little Torrent for more fire rate and multi-shot. You can use an Expel mode to increase faction damage if you want to, or you can increase your hit damage even more by using Scorch, although this isn't the best choice. I do suggest running Little Torrent because more fire rate equals more damage and multi-shot as well. So this time against the same enemies we have Corrosive and Heat, and of course this will just perform a bit better, you know, because Heat and Corrosive gets rid of all the armor and Heat does stack very easily, and yeah, enemies take a lot of damage. So even though Blast is now a bit better, it's still no better than just using Heat in my opinion. Of course there are some weapons that do benefit from Blast a lot more than just Heat, but for me Heat is still just better, especially against armored targets. You can also use Pistol Elementalist, which increases status damage, in this case hit damage, by 90%, and our reload speed, which is just a nice little thing. And it does perform quite well actually, because yeah, it turns out increasing the damage hit deals and also stacking a lot of hit stacks does combo quite nicely. And you might notice we are dealing a bunch of big numbers, and all the enemies are slowly but steadily disappearing. And of course, if we use the Incarnon form, it will deal also a bunch of damage, and enemies won't stand a chance against us anymore, because the Incarnon form does have a lot of upfront damage, and that damage will be inherited by the hit stacks that gets buffed by the mod, and enemies will not be allowed to stay alive for long, which is just amazing. Of course, the primary mode will apply more heat, and that means it will stack even better and deal more damage, so I do suggest using the primary fire instead of the Incarnon if you're going with this build, although, as always, Incarnon form is insanely powerful and it's always worth using. And then we have the gas build, which is something like this, so it's very similar to the previous build, although we are using Pistol Elementalist this time to increase damage dealt by gas in this case, and it does increase the damage by 90%, so it's quite a big multiplier. I think it's on the same level as Expel modes, if not better sometimes, so yeah, it's quite powerful, and you'll see that it deals quite a lot of damage, even with Caliban, with no modes and no other buffs, against just normal Greeneer enemies this time instead of Orokin, because why not? Yeah, we can just start killing some smaller enemies to get those buffs, and the moment we gain some merciless stacks, our damage will just start skyrocketing and everything will disappear. Like even through raw damage, this heavy gunner is slowly getting deleted, and of course we can swap to our Incarnon form and just annihilate everything, because now gas will deal a lot more damage. And yeah, of course, this is even better with armor ship, so if we were to armor ship enemies, for example, by using Jade's third ability, which is called Open Eyes, that gets rid of enemies' armor, we can do something like this, and remove enemies' armor very easily just by looking at them. And yeah, enemies won't like being well hit by deadly gases. So yeah, the weapon is very powerful with armor strip, and again, without armor strip, with some of the merciless stacks, damage is quite nice. And we can of course swap to the Incarnon form and just annihilate everything. I do have a more fire rate because of arcane velocity, but this just makes the build even funnier, so yeah. It's a very powerful weapon, and I really suggest you guys using it. It does also have quite a high Riven disposition. It's 3, so it's fine, and if you have a good Riven, it's worth using. But yeah, that is pretty much the Incarnon Atomos, and yeah, I really suggest using this weapon, especially because it's a very easy to get weapon. I think you unlock it at Master Rank 4, so it's a very early weapon, and then you can just evolve it into the Incarnon form and make this little beast. I am going to add a few minutes of survival for each of the builds, so you can see how each weapon performs. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe for more content. I hope you like this weapon series. I'm gonna probably make more about weapons that I enjoy and no one talks about. And yeah, have a great rest of the day, and bye-bye.
Still trying to figure out the mind piece. Looking for the love inside me. Sometimes, don't know how I feel that way sometimes. Yeah, they thought we could set out on the weekend. Funny how I kinda like this life. Funny how I kinda like this life. No, I like this life.